What's happening in Syria is a tragedy of epic proportions, and the numbers are certainly alarming. 1,000 people are being killed in Syria each week, millions are internally displaced, and 440,000 refugees have fled to neighboring countries. We understand that the UN expects the number of registered refugees outside Syria to grow to 700,000 by the end of the year and seeks almost 500 million for refugees across the region, 35% of which has been reached.
Well, the challenge at the moment is indeed the fact that the humanitarian situation inside Syria is deteriorating quite rapidly, and clearly this has an impact on the neighboring countries. We are really concerned about protection of civilians, the fact that we are seeing on a daily basis more than 2,000 Syrian refugees crossing the borders to the neighboring countries combined. We're close indeed to 450,000 Syrian refugees assisted or registered, although the actual number is a lot bigger than this. There's many Syrian refugees who do not want necessarily to come and register or have concerns about registration. So we're only reaching the poorest of the poor or the most vulnerable who come forward and say, indeed, we need to be helped.
We've seen them threatened by violence, children traumatized. Adults with these incredibly sullen looks on their faces, knowing how harsh these conditions are going to get for their kids. I was in those camps with Yasmin actually a few weeks back, and you could see the kids somewhat resilient, but the families, the adults, bearing the weight of this catastrophe, telling us that they have, some food for their kids, but now malnutrition is setting in. Their kids are getting sick from the cold, that these flimsy tents, the clothing they have, the blankets they have aren't nearly enough. And it's heartbreaking to hear from them. The most shocking thing, Ahmed, on the last day we were in the camps, we saw a busload of people getting in to go back to Dara. This was in the Zatri camp, so it was the easiest place for them to go back to. The conditions they're facing, the lack of work, the lack of basic necessities, and the lack of hope was just too much for this busload of people to bear.
We've heard that people on the ground are saying that they've, as Lara described, left one hell for another, many choosing to return back to Syria. Not many, but let's say some choosing to return back to Syria. What do you think they mean by one hell? I mean, what are the conditions like? And with the winter coming, do you envisage them getting any better?
Honestly, the conditions are just as bad as kind of you're hearing, coming with the winter months. It's cold. Right now it's freezing at night. It can be 2 degrees Celsius between the months of November and March. And these families are really, really struggling. Some families as large as 10 living in these small tents. The kids are getting sick. There's not enough food. There's a lack of clean water. They really have nothing.
But something that struck me with my interviews with Syrians in Jordan was how much Syrians are helping each other. I mean, the degree of self-help has not only been the entire course of the uprising, with Syrians helping each other during those first days, villages coming to the aids of cities and people in different neighborhoods coming to the aid of each other during the course of the actual uprising in Syria, but how Syrians are helping each other as refugees as well. I came across several initiatives, primarily of Syrian immigrants in the Gulf. So these are Syrian businessmen who've done well for themselves, giving a tremendous amount of aid.
We've collected stories, interviews with people in the camps and also displaced persons inside Syria. And what sticks with me is the way women have really stepped up to try to create any kind of normalcy for their kids. I think at this point, the worst conditions we've seen are for the displaced persons, those camps right inside the border, where there's less help, and women telling us and our reporters that they can't get blankets. The FSA is handing out blankets, but they're only giving them out if you have a national ID card. If you don't have an ID card, and chances are you left it at home while you're running away from the bombs, you can't get a blanket.